Alright, it's time for the final video for this chapter on West Africa. We're going to talk about the current conditions there, what life is like. Um, so you can see, I normally put a driving question here, but I apparently forgot to do that. So I kind of really want you to think about, though, just, like what similarities and what differences are you seeing, especially compared to, we just covered North Africa. Is there similarities or the differences there that exist between this group, not too far away, relatively speaking, and the North Africans? So lots of ethnic groups in this area. We already talked about gaining independence in the second video. And now there's a lot of ethnic groups that kind of live together. National identity. That's a term that I don't think a lot of Africans would really understand because they're so used to focusing on tribal life and conditions in their tribe. So like understanding like the kind of view we have as maybe Americans, standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and all the patriotic things that we do, that's something in their own culture that I think may be a little bit removed because they're so used to life in smaller groups. Not that they don't love their country, it's just it's a different kind of national identity, I guess you would call it. So there's lots of ethnic groups that are living in these areas together. Creates a lot of ethnic diversities, but it can create a lot of problems. So things that you might come up with here from these questions. Good things about ethnic diversity is, it creates multiculturalism. Diversity in itself is not a bad thing. Problems, though, ethnic tensions can result in violence, maybe civil wars, discrimination. So you can kind of see, even in these pictures here, slightly different dress among the people, different groups of people. So we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about these individual groups. It just kind of gives you a taste of, different cultures. Languages is a blending of European influence, but then also other languages that are more tribal from that area. This term Creole that you'll see right over here. You may have heard that word before, I'm not sure. It is sometimes used in the state of Louisiana in the United States. There it's a little bit different, but basically Creole is kind of like a blending of languages. Often it's like the blending of French, I believe, with other languages. That's how it is in Louisiana, French blending with African languages to create this kind of like unique dialect that's spoken in Louisiana. So here, two or more languages will blend together and become the language of the region. It's called Creole. So that's one of the things that kind of characterizes West Africa. Religion, Islam, that influence coming down from North Africa, but then also Christianity. That's probably a European influence. Then there's this term animism, and this is maybe the first time we're seeing the term this year. Animism is, kind of hear the word animal in there. It really is this religion where people believe that the natural world has spirits. So like the wind, rocks, water, those types of things could all have spirits in them. And that's kind of this belief of animism. It's, I would say most Native American tribes here in the United States probably were animistic to some degree, kind of believing that nature had like a spiritual quality to it. So that's animism. That's also practiced in a lot of areas in West Africa. So there's definitely this mixture of rural and city life. Some cities are really large, but then you also have a lot of people that live in villages. You kind of get a taste of that here. Picture on the left, definitely kind of more rural. People on the right, still kind of dressed maybe differently from you and I, but also kind of living in the city. There's a video here about Lagos, Nigeria, which is one of the largest cities in Africa. It may actually be the largest. It's either number 1 or number 2, I can't remember. So that could be a good video to watch. This just kind of talks about how like there's this blending of stuff, of culture. We've got, mask making in places like Ghana. There's been influences from books. I read this book, Things Fall Apart, in college. It's a fairly famous book, so even books that came out of this part of the world. Some of the African dances are popular, so there's definitely just a lot of culture. You can see some of the masks here that have been that are designed in West Africa. A lot of this comes back to animism. These masks may be used to like trace away spirits of some kind, to communicate and embody a spirit's many times those animistic things that we've been talking about. Governments, economies are strengthened by things like gold. We've talked about the Gold Coast already. There is some oil, petroleum, and other things that are, that can help the economy. We've already talked about independence and just the effect that that's had. Let's see what else we wanted to cover here. I don't think there's really anything I wanted to mention here. A lot of countries have been in debt. That's a common problem some countries deal with. This is one of the things I wanted to hit on here. So health. Africa has been incredibly plagued by HIV/AIDS. About 34 million people in the world live with HIV. 22.9 million of them live in sub-Saharan Africa. Means the area is south of the Sahara, so West and East Africa. HIV, there is no cure for it. You can get it a lot of different ways. Blood transfusion. I think a lot of times how it's passed in Africa is from mother to child. So babies being born with it, often not living to adulthood because they are born with this deadly disease. So it's a problem, and just educating people how it's spread, treating people the best they can. Medicines that treat HIV, there's no cure, but medicines that can treat it are very, very expensive. So I know that there's been a lot of work by the Red Cross and other organizations to come in and help try to reduce the effects of that. So in this map right here, West Africa doesn't maybe even have as high of numbers as South Africa. That red color you see there is probably the most heavily hit area, but you can see there's like 100,000 cases in Mali. Burkina Faso has 350,000 cases. Some of these countries are not really that large in population, so this is really a big concern. And so there's a lot of work that's been done, a lot of money raised to try to help Africa. It's not the only disease. There's other ones as well. We're going to talk about Ebola here. Back in 2013, 2016, I think most 7th graders have heard of Ebola before. I guess there's a lot of memes that go around out there, which is kind of crazy to me that like memes are meant to be kind of funny, and this is like a deadly disease. It's not funny at all. A lot of people died back in these between these years. I think it's kind of tapered off here a little bit now. So when infected, there was about a fatality rate of about 70%. So 7 out of 10 people, if they got Ebola, died from it. So reported about 11,000 people died of the outbreak. You can see it wasn't everywhere. It's kind of over here in Nigeria, and it was up here in some of these other West African countries. These countries in the middle here, not saying that they didn't have some, but it wasn't an outbreak, so it wasn't spreading as much. So we got both Ebola and AIDS. Neither one of those are the #1 killer in Africa. That is malaria. And I think there are some cases of malaria. I think malaria is maybe a little bit more further south as you get into areas where there's a little bit more water. So South Africa, Southern Africa is kind of Central Africa is where we'll see more of that. Overall, the population is very young in West Africa, mainly due to poverty, disease, lack of water. People just don't live as long in these countries as they do in ours. So that's a really big thing to kind of understand. Education is really important, but it's lacking for many kids, especially in rural areas. This video kind of talks about that. It's about child labor. I believe, if I remember correctly, this girl really can't go to school because she has to work to provide for her family. She's 10 years old. This is UNICEF. It's a worldwide organization that just does a lot to improve conditions, especially for children. So that video is worth watching. I think that is the last slide. So just kind of a review here, big things. Definitely want you to know about Ebola and HIV and their effects on West Africa. And there's a lot of diversity in this area. There really is. That comes from being controlled through imperialism, the slave trade that was there present, but then also just the rich culture of the people that are there. So all that blends in to create the history of West Africa and the current conditions of the people there. So thank you for watching.